Right, let's get going. Membership. Chris, do you want to just go down the membership? There has been some changes, as in I go from those benches to this seat. I'm chairman. So any other changes?
The only other change is that Councillor Veronica Jones, in being appointed to the Cabinet, is no longer on this committee. Her place has now been taken by Councillor Catherine Seymour. And that's the only most recent change.
Okay. Right. Minutes. Minutes of the meeting held 11th of July.
Move acceptance, Chair.
Move acceptance. Happy with that? Any? Yes, Councillor Hardy? Seconded. Okay. Let's move on. Apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillor Seymour and Councillor Humphrey.
Any more? I don't. Right. There's only Eve Chicken. I think missed. Right. At this point, I'd like to welcome Councillor Veronica Jones as Cabinet Member. Do you want to just tell us what your Cabinet membership is for? Portfolio or? Right. Councillor, also welcome Cabinet Member Councillor Patterson. Do you want to tell us what your role is in the Cabinet?
Well, it is adult wellbeing, which covers adult social care, mental health, and domestic violence, amongst others.
Right. So I'd like to welcome you both to these meetings. And if at any point you feel you need to come to a pre-meeting to sort of, promote whatever you're here for, please feel free to ask. Okay. Done apologies. Disclosure of members' interests, any? See nobody? Item 5, Health and Wellbeing Board. Pages 9 to 22. We can see the minutes of this board. Anybody got anything to add or would like to bring up that isn't around in any form? And are we happy with those minutes that go forward? Okay. I am now going to take item 7 in front of item 6 because the Senior Coroner is in court at the moment and hopefully will be along before we finish this meeting. So I'm going to go to item 7, notification of closure of 100-hour pharmacy in Cramlington. Who's taken? Right, the floor is yours. Sorry, your name is?
I'm Anne Everton and I'm the pharmacy consultant to the public health team.
Right, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is a fast-moving agenda in that pharmacy closures and reductions in hours are happening throughout the country. It's just not a Northumberland issue. This is affecting every single area in the country. Lloyds have closed all of their pharmacies wide in Sainsbury's stores, and they have also sold off all their other remaining businesses. They are getting out. They made a £66 million loss in the last financial year, and their parent company has decided that it is not a good market to be in. Boots have also notified the government that they are closing 300 stores across the country, and Northumberland is affected. It's affected in that one of the pharmacies in Blythe, the one in the health centre, is being closed. The reasons behind that, it's obviously not cost effective to keep it running. And looking at the other 2 stores that they own in Blythe, I'm not sure what their rental or business arrangement is, but obviously the one that is cheapest to close is the one in the health centre, because they will have no control over the rent of that particular premises as it's owned by NHS estates. They are also closing a store in Prudder. I've been out to Prudhoe and I have talked to the area manager there. They acquired the second store in Prudhoe when they bought out a local chain about 15 years ago, but have kept the two shops open to prevent anybody else moving in and taking business away from them. That time has now come where they can't afford to run both stores, and so they are closing the smaller one and moving all the business to the larger of the two stores. Neither pharmacy was exceptionally busy, and the area manager reassures me that they will be able to cope by taking some of the staff from the other store and providing all the services that were previously provided across the two stores from the one store. We have also heard, since I wrote this, that Tesco have reduced their hours at Hexham and Berwick upon Tweed. The government, or NHS England, is aware of the appalling financial situation that is hitting community pharmacies. The most at-risk stores were the ones that were open for 100 hours, as none of them make any money. In recognition of the fact that they were operating at a loss, NHS England gave permission at the end of May for 100-hour pharmacies to reduce their working hours to 72 hours, staying open till at least 9 p.m. every night, and continuing to do the hours that they were contracted to do on a Sunday. For most pharmacies, that means supermarket opening hours, either 10 to 4 or 11 till 5. We are lucky that the one in Blythe was open much later on a Sunday, and therefore they have to maintain those Sunday hours. What's happened is that they are now closing the Boots in Blythe for an hour at lunchtime every day, so that they don't have to go over the 72 hours. So we are left at the moment with one 100-hour pharmacy in the county, and that is in Ashington. And I don't know whether they're just slow on the uptake that they could reduce their hours, but that is still open till 10:30 at night, but I don't know how long for. On top of all this, the next nearest 100-hour pharmacy is in Kingston Park, and that has also reduced its hours till 9 p.m. each night. In addition, we have heard that Hayden Bridge Pharmacy is in administration. It's still providing services, but when it is sold, I don't know how many of the services that it currently provides will continue to be cost effective to provide. So I think what I'm telling you is that we are seeing a reduction in pharmacy hours, we are seeing closures and amalgamations, and this is part of a nationwide feature. It's not just us, but with our rural areas, I think we could be badly hit when there are only perhaps 1 or 2 pharmacies in a village. That could cause real problems in the future. And I think at that, I would like to hand over to the floor to take any questions.
Right. This was Houston would say, Houston, we've got a problem. Sorry. And I think what I'm going to do, I'll take questions now, but I think this is a problem that is going to just creep towards us all the time. And I will propose at the end of this that we say just before Christmas kick off the task and finish, because I think this is going to take there's some gateways we've got to get through to see what's going to happen. But I think we've got to get to somewhere that serves the people of Northumberland. Now, what that model will look like, I do not know, but it's being moulded for us probably by finance and companies or pharmacies going bust. But I'll take the floor now, but I think we'll all be on the same page that we need to look at this somewhere. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Just to that end, just to understand the problem and sort of thinking of potential solutions, can I just get an understanding? So the way we think about pharmacies is you know, you're ill, you get diagnosed, you get your tablets or whatever, and you carry on taking them. And it's not critical that you can't go at 11 at night. But I'm trying to think of emergency situations. So, you know, for example, if somebody's on heart tablets and literally life and death, they don't take them and they lose them or steal them, they need an emergency supply, or somebody's cancer treatment and absolute agony and they need morphine or whatever. In that situation, so say, for example, you're on heart tablets and you need them urgently, you can't wait for the morning, can you go to hospital and get them, or is that not possible? I'm just trying to understand the access and the emergency situation with getting...
I have been in touch with the chief pharmacist at our local hospitals, and that is one of his big concerns, is that what people will do is they will turn up at A&E, they will then have to try and get access to the medicines. There's not a pharmacist there in the hospital all night, so somebody would have to be called in to get stock from the hospital pharmacy to give to that patient overnight. It's not an ideal use of resources. The same would happen with cancer patients who need morphine urgently. I suppose what would be suggested is that pain relief teams anticipate more and have drugs already in patients' homes, but the knock-on effect will be more people turning up at A&E looking for medicines. If they phone NHS 111, they'll direct that patient to the nearest pharmacy that is open and ensure that a prescription and an emergency supply is available. But increasingly, we're not going to have that as a fallback option. I did, when Lloyd's gave notice in Cramlington, I went and talked to the pharmacist there about how often these sort of services are used and could she keep a record of it over the 6 months that they would be before closing down. She said it's seldom used. When it is, it's a lifeline. And I don't know what we're going to do. I always had at the back of my mind there was always the midnight pharmacy at Kingston Park, and that our two Tesco's in both Hexham and Berwick-on-Tweed would give some degree of cover across the county. But it's not going to be there in the future. I think we've become a 24-hour-a-day society, but the costs of providing a 24-hour-a-day cover is just not there.
Right, I've got a decent list of people. I'll start with Vice Chair Catherine Nesbitt. Councillor Nesbitt.
My concern is, I've got 4 chemists in Blythe, one being one that's been closed, which is in the doctor's surgery itself. The people go to the doctors to get a prescription, they go straight to that chemist and they get what they need, which is ideal, but that's closing. The other problem I've got is the one in Madison Street, which is the one that's open late, very late. Is that the one you're saying is going to be closed for an hour through the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, that's fine, that's fair enough, that. But it's a small chemist, and I mean, every day it's full. Now, you've got Railway Medical, that's got about, nearly 30,000 patients, and then you've got Marine, that's got about 68,000 patients. And there's a lot of them now using Madison Street. So they're going to take more on in there. But they haven't got the pharmacists to cover.
There'll still be the same number of pharmacists. We may lose the one from the health centre pharmacy, but if it's not making money, they're not going to keep it open.
Mm-hmm. It's just my concern about the pharmacists, because you can go in, you've got to wait for one to come back from dinner because they haven't got another one to cover. You know what I mean? So, I mean, which is not a problem. I mean, they've got to have their lunch and that, you know, but that's the problem I've got. So they're going to a small chemist going to take on a hell of a lot of more patients.
We're gonna see more of this. I'm gonna
Yeah,
go to.
that's fine, but I just wanted to just get that in.
I think
just
we're
know
all
that.
going to get a bite at this, but I think the bigger bites to come. Isabel, Councillor Hunter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we're all singing off the same hymn sheet here. It's the 9 o'clock shutting because, you know, we're talking about the north of the county. You know, Tesco's was always the handy one. If you had to go to the hospital would say, there's a prescription, go to Tesco. So we're losing that. You've got the shift workers as well that, you know, they're maybe coming off a shift or going to a shift, trying to pick something up. And it's if we're not able to access it, if you've not got transport, where are you going to get transport at night to go to somewhere like Newcastle or a hospital, you know, say Cramlington Hospital to get medication. We've also got bank holidays. I know the doctors always say, remind you, check your prescriptions before a bank holiday, make sure you've got enough medication. But people forget, especially the older generation. So I think something needs to be looked at. But yes, I appreciate, as a business case, people have to run businesses that are viable. I think it's more of a government one that needs to, more funding needs to come in to sort this. And I agree with the Chair, we need to set up a task and finish group to look at this.
Right, I'm going to take councillors first, and I'll go to Derry. Councillor Hardy.
In Berwick, 3 of the 4 pharmacists are going to be affected. 2 are Lloyd's, Wells Close Square and Union Brae. So they're no longer going to be there.
They will still be, they've been sold.
Yes.
And they've been sold as ongoing businesses. So there shouldn't be any reduction in the number of pharmacy premises. The only issue that I've come across so far is that Tesco's are going to work for 72 hours a week instead of 100 hours a week. They will be open probably 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday to Saturday, and then 10 till 4 on a Sunday.
So moving forward, do we know if there's going to be any facility within the new hospital come Wells Close Surgery in Berwick?
No. There might be a hospital pharmacy within the new facility, but it certainly won't be open extended hours. And the chances are that the pharmacist, if there is one, will be on call. At the moment, I think the drugs come up from Ashington.
Yeah, right. I'm going to go, before I go to Councillor Wendy Patterson, I'm going to go to Derry Nugent, who's put a hand up. Derry.
Thank you very much. As you're all aware, this is an issue that has been brought to Health Watch extensively, starting with the Cramlington situation. I think where we're coming from on this is that while NHS England are aware of the services situation and the position that pharmacies find themselves in, there is a need to understand the impact that these piecemeal closures are having on patients, because I think that's the problem we've got at the moment. It's one after the other and here and there and dotted around, and I think that strategic look would be very good. And I think some of the issues that people have mentioned about early mornings, because if you look at the timings now that are being suggested, they're 9 a.m. onwards, which obviously, as you say, if you're shift working or need something early is not fitting well. There's also the issue about the cost of having to travel. So I'm really pleased to hear about the task and finish group, which I think will give some insight into this, and I would suggest that the 3 issues that would be usefully looked at by that task and finish group would be access, so the whole issue around access to pharmacy services in its broader sense, the range of services, because I think, as we're saying, when services are replaced, will they have the same range of services for people, and what does that mean if you have to travel for different services? And I think the other issue, which is slightly to the side but is part of the same issue, for patients, because this is one of the things that we hear an awful lot about, is the supply of drugs. So people not being able to get prescriptions filled and having then to travel around. And obviously if there are fewer pharmacies locally, then where do they have to travel to? So I think access, range of services and supply would be a really good set of issues that we would like to see addressed. Yeah.
I think, you know, when I said we're going to start this, I think we need to take our time, because this is a long project, and we're going to see the same problem crop up time and time again. I'm going to go to Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I really just wanted to mention about delivery of medication, because I think that is becoming, if you like, more popular. It's possibly more geared towards those that have a renewable prescription. But I don't see why that couldn't be rolled out. I think the only snag is for those that work. I understand you have to sign for it, or at least be in the house, which could be a little bit problematic. But I think that's possibly a way forward, where we're getting them delivered.
Can I just... Delivery is not an NHS service, and any pharmacy that provides it either provides it at a cost, usually about £5 per delivery, and some have an annual fee of about £55 for however many deliveries. One of the reasons we suspect that Hayden Bridge has gone into administration is that they hoovered up an awful lot of patients on the basis that they would give free delivery. And I think what we are seeing now is that with all the other financial pressures and the cost of living increases, is that isn't a model that is financially viable anymore. Pharmacies tend to offer free delivery to try and keep hold of prescriptions, but they don't get any recompense for providing that as a service. It's done either for goodwill or for a fee, which possibly doesn't cover the cost of the service.
Right.
Just like to back right up on this one, there is a delivery service there is a delivery service through Royal Mail. That's a free one. Mm-hmm. But there's also the pharmacies who've got their own, which is, you're right, you have to pay £5. But the other ones through the Royal Mail, they get noted when your prescription's there, and they'll deliver it for you, free of charge. So there is that option. But it's no good if you've got to stay in. You've got to be in the house to be able to pick it up, and that's the problems. People are working.
I think when we get to where we're going with this, which is going to be a task and finish route, which I think we're all on the same page, we will look at the delivery and look at other things. Before I sum up where we are, does anybody else want to contribute? Councillor Bowman?
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first one is, why are we in this position, and who is to blame?
Supermarket.
And the second question is, could NHS England change its tactics in the sense that you could provide the pharmacy service directly yourself, open stores and do it direct, and not rely on commercial organisations? I wonder if that's a point of consideration for the future.
I think on that one, I don't think you're going to be able to answer that.
Well, I could.
Well, I know, but it's not going to happen, is it?
No, the government is never going to operate its own pharmacies, because it's much cheaper to parcel it out. But also, it is a restricted market. You cannot open a pharmacy for NHS prescriptions unless you get a contract, which is a very tortuous route through NHS England. So they have the market sewn up. But way back in 2004, when they changed the GP contract and then thought, oh, we don't have to have GPs open over the weekend or in the evenings, what are we going to do for patients? I know we'll let pharmacies open wherever they want to, provided they open for 100 hours a week, which is where the 100-hour pharmacies come from. And they thought this would be a wonderful solution to their problem of what to do, because GPs didn't have to work weekends and evenings. However, they didn't anticipate that the pharmacies would open in supermarkets, and supermarkets loved this because they were open anyway, but they're all closed. They have restricted opening on a Sunday, and therefore they're only allowed to open for 6 hours, whereas the government thought that these pharmacies would be open 9 till 9, 7 days a week. So they shot themselves in the foot to start off with by not anticipating where these pharmacies would open up. And then, of course, they've become less and less viable. So they're left with these pharmacies which are unviable, which have opened up all over the place. And another government minister at some time said, we've got all these pharmacies clustered around GP surgeries. I know, we'll make the pharmacy contract less attractive, so some of them will go to the wall, and it's the survival of the fittest. And it takes no account of patient need, or there's no plan behind the closures. And what you're seeing is a flat pharmacy contract fee, which hasn't increased since 2017. And so you are seeing the result of that now, which we predicted it would happen. But in a rural county like Northumberland, it's not the same as central London, where you can walk 100 yards further down the street and come across another pharmacy, or have real pockets of deprivation where a pharmacy is really needed, as if like an outreach health advice centre for those communities.
Right. I think that we all know that we're going to have to look deeper into this, so we are going to set up a task and finish. Probably never finish the way this is shaping up, but I think we do need to have some sort of look. Yeah, we can probably spend all day going over how did this happen. And, you know, the supermarkets did have a rush to try and push out everybody else because they were the only store in town, and now that they're trying to offload. So, interestingly, this morning I was at the airport committee, and we discussed the restrictions that may be coming to the airport or around about the airport for an NHS. They're doing the trial drone delivery. So, you know, as one door closes, a window opens. So I don't know where they go with that, but people who fly aeroplanes, small light aeroplanes, are getting a bit annoyed because their space is going to be taken away. However, that we can look at all of these things. So I'm going to ask Chris to put an email out to have a task and finish, or a task group. And are we all happy with that? Because I think this is just going to continue piecemeal, bit by bit, and we'll lose everything that we hold dear. And you only hold it dear when you need a pharmacy or you need it for relations. So I think it's close to our heart because we are a rural county still. So I think, and obviously, the general pattern is that this will be chaired by the vice chairman, so that will be Kath. Okay, are we happy with that? And yes.
Yes. Agreed, Chair. I'll second your proposal.
Seconded. You want to speak?
I do. Sorry, Chair. I'm Pam Lee. I'm one of the public health consultants in the public health team. I just need to remind the OSC that actually pharmacy is a responsibility of the ICB. So it's NHS England. So any task and finish group needs to work with the ICB. So I'll work with Chris to make sure that the terms of reference take that into account.
As I say, there will be a map at the end of this that we'll have to say this is where we're going.
Yeah.
Because ultimately we have to serve the people of Northumberland.
Absolutely.
And they'll get upset if they all close.
But we
with
do
no
have,
real reason for doing it.
But we do have to work with the ICB. Yeah. So I'll work with you, Chris.
Would it be helpful if I offered my services as consultant?
Yeah.
To at least tell you what the regulations are and what you can and can't do.
We will need advice. We're not going to rush into this, but we're going to do the job properly because it is an ongoing problem that is not going to go away until we've hit base camp, whatever that is, because we've been up the hill, now we're going to go down. So we've had a second there. Are we happy with the process to get your names and get this going? Right, we're going to do that. And we've got 1 or 2 fresh volunteers already to help us in this task. Okay, any more on this before I close, move on? Right, thank you for your attendance on this one, thank you. And we now move on to item 6. HM Senior Coroner Andrew Hetherington, Senior Coroner for the North Northumberland, etc. Do you want to come down? Right, just take a couple of minutes by the time we get people in place. Surprised you can't get drugs in Blythe. Sorry.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Andrew Hetherington. I'm the Senior Coroner for Northumberland.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Karen Lownton. I'm Interim Head of Community Services, and within my portfolio of services, I have the Coroner Service.
So I've just put together some slides. I hope you've all had the opportunity to consider the report I prepared, which is dated May 2023, which is a look back at the Coroner Service sort of post-COVID onwards over the last 2 years. Just to remind you all, the coroners were part of the Public Health, Inequalities and Stronger Communities Directorate. As a coroner, I'm an independent judicial officer who's appointed but not employed by the local authority to carry out my statutory duty when a death is notified to me to investigate in circumstances. We work very closely with registrars who are co-located with the coroner's office here in County Hall. It's not an expectation to produce an annual report, but I think it's really important that members have the opportunity to know what's happening with the coroner, if there are any notifiable trends and any circumstances we should bring to your attention in particular. So what I'd like to do is just to take you through where we are and a few headline topics I'd like to discuss. So apologies. Firstly, annual statistics for 2022, any notifiable trends. In particular, looking at those statistics, I looked at the number of suicide conclusions that were being returned. You'll all be aware of the circumstances regarding Lucy Letby, who's convicted of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6, and the Countess of Chester Hospital, and an inquiry has been launched. There's also been the independent review into patient safety regarding NIAS. You may have seen headlines in the newspapers with regard to allegations that were brought by a whistleblower with regard to delays in ambulances attending and the potential falsification of evidence. And lastly, the statutory medical examiner scheme. So just to take you through the annual statistics, I've looked back at figures going back to 2020. It covers the COVID pandemic. And just for ease, the statistics run to year end, calendar year end to December. So in 2020, Northumberland, North and South, I've still done the split because we are classed as 2 areas for statistical purposes. We will be merged. I am the sole coroner for this area, but in 2020, you had 1,737 deaths referred to this area, and that resulted in 182 inquests being opened. And out of those deaths referred, we had between myself and my predecessor, 569 post-mortem examinations that were authorised. And that's a post-mortem rate of 32%. I'll come on to explain why that's significant in a moment. Moving into 2021, we saw an increase of 10% in the deaths referred to Northumberland, up to 1,918. We saw a dramatic increase in the number of inquests, up to 332. Reason for that is some of those inquests predated the pandemic. We had a period of lockdown. We didn't actually have the court in County Hall for in-person hearings until November 2020. We were able to get through those, and I'm glad to say as a as an area we had no black blood coming out of COVID. The post-mortem rate is a reflection really of the number of deaths that sadly referred to the area, increased slightly to 678, which is a reflection of 35% on all deaths reported to the coroner. Last year, so to year ending December 2022, we saw 2,028 deaths referred to Northumberland. Looking back to 2020, that's nearly a 17% increase on deaths referred. We concluded, so we opened 262 inquests, and we had a post-mortems. The number of post-mortems authorised by myself or one of my assistant coroners was 732, which is a post-mortem rate of 35%. Just again to put that in the context, the national average, that's for England and Wales, is about 43% of all deaths referred, so we are well below the national average. So what does all that mean? To put it into context, we are the second busiest area in the Northumberland sphere, and by that I mean where Northumberland Police provide coroners' officers, with 2,028 deaths. Newcastle and North Tyneside as a combined area is the largest, with 2,937. Then we have Sunderland, which is approximately half the deaths referred in Northumberland, and then Gateshead and South Tyneside. And if you look on the end column when it comes to the post-mortem rate, again, we compare favourably to that. Why are we so busy and why are we getting busier is a question you may ask. I think one of the reasons for that is deaths are now being, I'm satisfied, are being captured. We had a change in the law in 2019 when the notification of deaths regulations came out, and that made it clear what the law was as to when a death should be referred to the coroner. Prior to that, it was very much an interpretation of the law. Local coroners had their own practices which they disseminated to healthcare trusts, etc. We also have NSEC, which is an emergency centre which is growing in capability and reach. We're getting a lot of people who perhaps don't live in Northumberland, North Tyneside area, etc., who are going to the Accident Emergency Centre, and sadly they are dying there. So those are persons or individuals who don't ordinarily live in Northumberland. We're very lucky in Northumberland with our local trust because NSEC is well equipped with scanners. So it's very common for the hospital or the doctors being able to give us a cause of death, which is one of the reasons why we're able to keep our post-mortem rate low.
So a summary on this slide here, which covers the deaths registered in Northumberland, as Andrew's outlined already. Matters are referred to the coroner where a death occurs in the county of Northumberland. It doesn't necessarily mean that the person who has passed away is a resident of the county, and exactly the same is applicable to deaths which are registered. So the registration aligns to where the event occurred. So in 2020, we had a very high number of deaths which were registered for obvious reasons due to the COVID pandemic, which was at its height over the course of that year. We had just over 4,195. In 2021, a slight reduction as a little bit of normality has returned, with just over 4,072 deaths registered by the county of Northumberland. And then in 2022, just under 4,000, 3,977. It's good comparison data to look at in terms of the caseload and the workload that the coroner has, and you'll start to get a sense of the volume of deaths which are referred to the coroner in the county of Northumberland. We're looking at just over 2,000 per annum now, and that really is around about 50% of the deaths which occur in the county are referred to the coroner for scrutiny.
And that reflects the position nationally, in that it tends to be the case that half deaths are referred to the coroner than are recorded nationally. Looking back to 2019, on looking at the statistics that were returned, I identified a trend. I need to put a caveat firmly in place in that when a death is referred or a death occurs and the coroner is notified, that doesn't reflect the date of the inquest as to when the conclusion is returned. But looking at the statistics, looking back to 2019 for Northumberland as a whole, north and south, there were 18 suicide conclusions returned. When we move forward to 2020, that figure had increased to 30, which on the previous year was a rise of 66%. 2021, that had increased again to 44, which is an increase of 47% on the year before. But for 2022, last year, we'd seen that figure drop to the figure we'd seen in 2019, thereabouts, of about 21 suicide conclusions returned. That reflected a national trend in 2020. We saw nationally the number of suicide conclusions increase of around 8%. Reasons again for that is COVID could be a cause in that there was a backlog of inquests that weren't heard due to lockdown and for various other reasons. So those could have been deaths that occurred pre-2020, could have been a backlog from the end of 2019. There was obviously the delay with COVID, remote working, no in-person hearings, but probably more significantly is the recent case of Morn. So on the 13th of November 2020, the Supreme Court gave their judgment. It wasn't unanimous, but what they said of a majority of 3-2 was that all conclusions in coronial inquests were to be determined on the civil standard, that is the balance of probabilities. Now, previously, to reach a conclusion of suicide or unlawful killing in the coroner's court, I needed to be satisfied to the criminal standard beyond reasonable doubt. Believe it or not, it's a legacy and a throwback to the 1950s and 60s, where suicide was seen to be a criminal offence of self-murder, effectively. Again, fortunately moved on from times like that. But now, so I'm looking on the balance of probability. So that burden has now shifted and gone to a lower standard of proof. So that could be one of the explanations from that. And obviously, I'm heartened to see that we do appear to be returning, given the lower standard of proof, back to figures that we saw back in 2019. With regard to Lucy Letby, just to remind you all, I'm sure you've read the circumstances. She was convicted actually of the murder of 7 babies and the attempted murder of 6. That was between 2015 and 2016. It's been announced that there'll be an independent inquiry led by Lady Justice Thirlwell. Again, just to explain, not all child deaths would be referred to a coroner. It would be in similar circumstances for an adult, whether or not there'd be a violent or a natural death, if the cause of death was unknown, or if the child is potentially has died in state custody. In Northumberland, we've had the medical examiner system in place within the trust since its outset in 2019. So all deaths now will either be scrutinised by the medical examiner or, if they're referred, to the coroner. Second item just to bring to your attention is the issue with regard to whistleblowing for NIAS. You may have seen the article in the Sunday Times back in May 2022 where an individual alleged that NIAS were covering up fatal paramedic errors and suggesting that there was attempts to deliberately alter or omit important facts from particularly families and from witness statements that were filed with the coroner. The whistleblower also alleged that they were being bullied and intimidated as part of that process. There had been a police investigation as to whether or not allegations of perverting the course of justice could be withheld, and that was found not to be the case. There was a review undertaken by Dame Marion Griffiths, which has now been published, which I should point out that the whistleblower would not engage with, and they considered 5 cases in particular. None of those cases related to the deaths in Northumberland. I think there was 1 in Teesside, 3 in Durham, and I think 1 South Tyneside. Just to point out that none of those deaths were in Northumberland. We have a good relationship with NIAS. I haven't identified any concerns since, and I've read the findings that were reached by Dame Marion Griffiths with great interest, but it's something we keep under constant review. And lastly, just to bring to your attention, there'll be the statutory medical examiner scheme. We're working towards a date of April 2024, so that will be deaths in the community. The medical examiners within the trust have been working closely with GP colleagues to have that scheme up and running, just to assure you all that now all deaths will be scrutinised, whether or not those deaths are referred to the coroner, be referred by the medical examiner. What do I think the impact of that will be? I think we'll see less natural causes deaths being referred to the coroner, but I think we'll see an uptick in the number of inquests, because families will have that opportunity, whereas perhaps they wouldn't before, to have a voice heard with regard to concerns they have regarding the deaths of their loved ones. That's all from me. Is there any questions?
Right, any questions through the chair? Councillor Hill?
Thank you. That's it's really interesting to read this report. And most people just think of coroners investigating deaths, not looking to prevent them and finding patterns and so on. To that end, I've just got a couple of things that I just want to pick up on. On page 27, in our bundle, page 4 of the report, you write, in this area, I hear of a number of deaths following road traffic collisions. Now, obviously, any coroner across the country or the world would say that. So I'm presuming that it's, given the size of the population and so on, it's unusually high. And can I conclude that you're therefore saying that there's evidence that there's inherent safety issues with the local roads, and particularly obviously referring to the lack of dualling of the A1? And the second point about suicides that have gone up, and you're talking about there's actually more of an increase in female suicides, and you mentioned young people. Can I ask a couple of things on that? Is that consistent with the national trend, or does it seem worse? Obviously, bear in mind our population and so on. And also, you're referring to access to mental health provision. Do you break down, there's an obvious link there, but do you break down different areas in Northumberland? So is there evidence that in somewhere like Berwick, which is, we have issue with access to various services, including mental health, is there evidence, can you pinpoint, say, areas like Berwick and maybe one or two others, there's higher suicide, and can you identify linked access and location issues to mental health services with the suicide issue?
Dealing with the first issue first, with regard to the A1, the number of road traffic collisions, I'm not aware of anything to suggest that we have an unduly high number of deaths that result from road traffic collisions. The law changed in 2013, where we had the new conclusion of road traffic collision. Prior to that, it would be perhaps a conclusion of accident or misadventure. We have a main artery that goes through the area that leads to Scotland. It is a single carriageway. Anecdotally, I'm not aware of any evidence to suggest that's unduly high because of that. I know my predecessor did write what was at the time a Rule 43, what's now referred to as a Regulation 28 report, to the authorities to highlight the concerns of the dualling of the A1 with regard to that. But in my tenure, I haven't noted any particular concern. If I did, it is always open to me at the end of the evidence. If I think there's evidence of a risk of future fatalities, I can write, in particular, the Highways Agency. I have made certain inquiries after certain inquests where there's been concern with regard to trees overgrowing roads and things like that. In particular, that's been the responsibility of the local authority, but the response has been very prompt and I've had no undue concerns with them. With regard to suicides, higher in females and males, I haven't noted any trend out with the figures that are produced nationally. It is interesting that as a nation we did see the number of suicides increase, in particular in 2020. I did hear anecdotal evidence from families, indeed from people who had gone on to take their own lives, who had expressed either loneliness or fear of contracting COVID, as to whether COVID was a cause for that. There will be an independent inquiry which will deal with that. It could be one of the issues that is discussed. I'm not aware of any significant link between particular regions with regard to suicide either. I do see certain areas with regard to drug-related deaths, but not in relation to self-inflicted deaths. Okay. Let's answer the questions.
Anybody else? Councillor Hunter?
Yes, it's just, we're in a time where things are very difficult for some families and that. And I'm just wondering, in the past, we went through these phases before. Does that often increase suicides? Because people get to the stage that they've got no money, that they're in debt, and they've just got to the stage they don't know how to get out of it. And I'm just wondering if these trends can sometimes come through during that.
I'm sure that is the case, and we are looking out for matters that may arise due to that. Obviously, as a coroner, I don't have a general duty. My duty only arises once a death is referred to me. And when it comes to an inquest, I have to answer the 4 statutory questions, which is who the deceased was, when they died, where they died, and how. And the one question families want to know is why. and that's not something I can sadly answer. It tends to be, sadly, the individual who has died who's the only person who can answer that question. Sometimes we get some insight where somebody leaves a note or a message and explains what their intent is, but it is something I'm mindful of, and I do expect to see an impact of that in the future.
I think on that one, you could equally make the case for online gambling, which didn't exist that long ago. So, so it's, because I got my ear bent about the bookies closing in Ponteland a bit ago, and I didn't realise that closed. But obviously, the internet's done an awful lot of damage to the high street in some way, shape or form. So, what's great, the figure that I plucked out of there was that the 4,000 people die approximately every year in this county. And that's been relatively constant, which is about the same size as the number that our divisions are about 4,000 people. So it's easy to sum up to think, hang on, if you're in that number, we lose a division sort of every year when the boundary changes come in, so which is the next month. Anything else on the coroners? I mean, it must be a fascinating subject that people are shy about, because no one likes to look over that. But it is, I mean, it was my portfolio a bit ago, and it is fascinating. Les?
Thank you, Chair. Fascinating report. For somebody who has been in the mental health team, myself, I tried suicide on a few occasions.
How do you get on, Les?
But it's very difficult for me to read some of the statements you place here, especially for children. I have concerns. My concerns is you make your reports, you finalise your reports. Are those reports taken up and acted upon? And the other thing is that I don't see any reference, or very little reference, to people who use drugs and have died because of the consequences of those drugs. Do you look into the deaths of people because of overdose and that sort of thing?
First, I'm sorry about the challenges you had. With regard to concerns following an inquest, I do have the power, in fact the duty under Regulation 28 to write to somebody who I think can make a difference. The reference I referred to in my report is the death of a 12-year-old girl. There was considerable media attention surrounding that. There were allegations of bullying, there were allegations of... she had a number of issues that she was battling with. And at the end of the evidence, I heard very compelling evidence from the school, from mental health care professionals, from specialists in accident and emergency as well. And it was clear to me that they couldn't have done any more for Charlie. It's in the public domain, so I'm not breaching any confidence by mentioning her name. And at the end of the evidence, I was so compelled with regard to concerns I had with regard to potential waiting times, access to mental health care. Mum had made reference, particularly in the media, to there being a 3-year waiting list for access to mental health care provision. That wasn't the case. I didn't find that on the facts, and Mum was very candid and said, I think I might have misheard that. And I was concerned, well, if there is this delay, that this needs to be addressed. What the evidence actually reflected was there wasn't a delay then, but the number of children who are accessing mental health services now has increased dramatically. So there could be in the future a real risk of children getting help when accessing mental health provision. So I wrote to who was the then Secretary of State for Health, Therese Coffey. I think this was Liz Truss's government, so she was only in post about 2 weeks after that. But I got a very detailed response back from the Minister with the responsibility for social care. And the response was basically, yeah, we do recognise it. It is a real concern. It's something we have heard from other agencies. And they explained in detail what their response was being, that additional funding there were to be provided. Now, when I issue a Regulation 28, it's up to the individual to receive it, to provide a response within 56 days. I got a response from a government minister. There's no real sanction in my powers if somebody doesn't respond to that. The Chief Coroner has to read out a list in Parliament, so somebody would be blacklisted, as it were, for not responding to that, but I've got no real power to enforce it. But if I do notice trends, then I'll continue to write those letters. Your next question was with regard to drugs, and you're absolutely right. We do have a very high number of drug-related deaths in this area. Again, similar to the conclusion of road traffic collision, the law changed in 2013. We had the new conclusion of drug-related death, also alcohol-related death as well. We do have areas in Northumberland where drugs are a real challenge. I do record a high number of drug-related deaths. We do share that information with a number of agencies. Sometimes criminal charges do emanate from prior to my investigation, in which case I might not conclude an inquest as to who supplies those drugs. But it is something, and something certainly I can feature in my report for next year that will be of interest to you.
Can I ask too myself, as councillors, we pick up angriness behind the screen of a computer that we never encountered before COVID. And we get the feeling that people are so angry or so het up about things that they didn't used to be. Does that come through in your courts or not?
I think when people attend court and give evidence, they're very respectful to the process. We tend not to get issues directly in the court setting. Families are naturally, when they've suffered a bereavement, are aggrieved, and we do see their emotions that come out from that. Security, again, we're very lucky in Northumberland. I have heard stories. There was a coroner's court in Essex where an individual was writing to a number of coroners and suggesting various things. They'd actually entered the court, and recollections vary, but the coroner was actually tied up and issued with a writ. So it is on the watch list that emotions are running high, and whether or not security should be increased in a coroner's court setting.
Right, and you said on the trends issue, my world is the farming world, and that was the highest risk of suicide because one, they had the equipment, two, they're used to death if you're a livestock farmer, and three, the loneliness and obviously the financial pressures. Is that still the number one sort of area that this happens, or has that changed?
Again, whilst I can't ascertain why, the reasons that people have put forward, debt being an issue, you refer to gambling and debts that result from gambling, and loneliness, family pressures, work pressures. Sometimes we just simply don't know.
You don't know. Any more? Thank you both, and assistants at the back, thank you for coming today. It is a very enlightening subject, and wish you well. Thank you. Item 8. Report of the Scrutiny Officer. Over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Chair. Most will remember that at the last committee we started doing the forward plan in the work programme together. So again, the first item is the forward plan. It is a list of decisions that Cabinet have taken since August and a list of the decisions Cabinet are due to be taken in the next few months. I don't think there is anything on there that would be relevant for this committee within its terms of reference, either that Cabinet have taken or will be taken. So I don't intend to spend much time on the forward plan. The work programme, I just want to point out that at the next meeting in November, we'll have Newcastle coming back to talk about their oncology performance. Members might remember that when they came to talk about their quality accounts, this committee was quite concerned about some of the figures around cancer. So 6 months on, Newcastle will be coming to talk about that. And there's a number of items in there for November and January that I'm just waiting to iron out around inequalities and the health and wellbeing strategy refresh. So that will be coming over the next couple of months, and I will take away the committee's comments today on task and finish groups and bring something with substance back.
Right, on the task and finish groups, I want to have a little discussion on a topic that's been brought to me. And it was brought to me a bit ago, and I've been trying to gather some evidence on what we need to do. And I'm going to suggest that after we have a discussion, a small task and finish, or before we get into the bigger stuff of what we saw, the Cramlington report, it's been brought to my notice, and I've looked into it, defibrillators. Defibrillators are like mushrooms. They've popped up all over the place. The problem I see that we've got, and I'll just speak and then I'll open it for a suggestion. I've got them stuck on schools, stuck on village halls, stuck all over the place. I got my ear bent when there was a fatality of a bloke on a motorbike just outside of Belsay, had a heart attack, and this woman berated me for us not having a defibrillator. I said, there is one. There's one at the school wall. So there's that, either the miscommunication or not knowing where they are. Then the Capheaton Village Hall went, everybody wanted this defibrillator. And they've got one, and there's one at Kirkheaton, which is not far away, etc. They're all over. No one seemed to know where the Kirkheaton one came from. But then they said to me, we've got a problem with this because the defibrillator needs a new battery and pads every 5 years. And it's not when they were put on the wall, it's when they were made. So you could have a brand new defibrillator that's 3-year-old, and the cost of the battery and the pads is £400. So I'm going to ask that we have a little group that look at this and see what we can do. Whether it's something like a heart stuck on a post outside the school that says there's a defibrillator. It's like a national or a Northumbrian thing where people could actually, because unless you know where they are, you don't know. And they say, oh, well, you can look at the app, but if you're in an area where there's no coverage or other things, I would really like to have a little delve into this. And have we got another problem coming down the line where someone gets a defibrillator stuck on them or whatever and the battery's flat? So I'm just asking, can we have a look at this, and are you happy that we do, and who would like to help if we go that far? Les?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There was an incident in Seaton Delaval outside the council office where somebody had a heart attack, and I believe the person was travelling at the time. Anyway, they went to a local place where they thought they would be able to get access to a defibrillator, only to find that it was out of use. It was no good. But anyway, the good ending to the story, this gentleman did survive, and the ambulance got there quick, and he survived. So that opened up a whole pan of questions, as it were, like you were saying. Once they are installed, who's looking after them? And does the local community actually know where they are? And okay, you can learn quickly, I understand, on the use of them. You are told how to use them on the telephone. So the whole system needs a good delving into, and we need to start planning where they actually go. If you live in
favour?
Yeah, I'll finish off by saying, if you live in Seaton Sluice and you have a heart attack, you're going to live forever because there's 19 there. So we need to really question that.
Oh, wow. Colin?
There's a lot of work going into a registrar of where defibrillators are, and one of our fellow councillors is part of that through the fire service. But we need a more constructive, joined up register to cover Northumberland that we represent. There is an issue with pads. There is an issue with batteries, but 99% of the time it's failure to know where the actual unit is. And that's the biggest problem that we face.
Isabel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Joe Hattard has clerk to parish councils, all the defibs are supposed to be registered on the circuit, which as soon as you phone up 999, they will tell you that's your nearest one that is available for use, because the custodians have to keep them up to date, and the circuit lets you know when it needs to be checked, and they take it off until you've checked it and said it's fit. And they give you the code, and it works on that way.
The code's it's the same code all over the country.
And it's a case of, so they should tell you where your nearest one is. And again, it's parish councils and local communities buying them, but it's they have to pick up the cost of the batteries and the pads are not interchangeable. Because I did have a parish council that had to wait over 6 months for a replacement pads. Luckily, it was only because they were going out of date, but one was used, which luckily saved a life in Berwick. And we managed to get a set of pads with a year's life left on them to replace that. Otherwise, that would have been out of use for 6 months. So I think, yes, I would support, we do need to look at this.
Anybody else? Agreed. Councillor Bowman, Les?
Just to follow on, I think that we need to look beyond our communities, the places we live. We need to look at the places we work, places we travel to. What could it be on trains, for example? You know, we need to look at different aspects of our lives, work, play, and recreation and community life. We need to start thinking a bit wider. And to narrow it down, why don't we as County Council, just, if we can, put one on every premise that we own and operate?
Have too many premises. I don't know. This is what I think it's been shotgun. Just pull the trigger, blast them here, there, when we haven't put them on in the right place. And where's the right place? I do not know. On a train, Councillor Hill?
Just going to say, I support having this. I mean, it's one of these frustrating things, and it's interesting what Councillor Hunter says about parish and town councils, because it is exactly the sort of thing they should be doing, to say, coordinating, right, let's look where we've got ones, let's check, do people know? I think if you use it, you have to replace the battery as well, don't you? There's all these issues, and it would be ideal, which I'm thinking town and parish councils, but most aren't competent enough, and all they just say, NCC should be doing this, that, and everything. It's exactly the kind of thing town and parish councils should be doing.
Right, well, I picked up that there's probably an opening for somebody, some organisation, to what I'd call constantly service these machines or whatever. There's an opening there, because the parish council, it was the rush to buy one, it was the thing to have. Now we're into the area where, right, we've got them, what are we going to do to keep them going or keep them maintained? So are we happy that we have a little look at this? I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm confused like you, because I only know where they are locally, and maybe there could be some sort of indicator at the end of a road that there's. I do not know what the outcome will be, but I think Councillor Hardy said 90% don't know where deaths are because no one knows where they are. So I think we have got a bit of work to get our hands into for the good of everybody. So, and if Les said the 17 or 19 where you live, is that, seems that seems like over delivery.
Yeah. And the reason for that, Chair, is he used to be the head specialist at the Freeman Hospital for heart transplants and so on. So you can see why it's happened. But yeah, go and live in Seaton Sluice if you want to live forever.
Right, with that, we'll take that on board, and just Chris will follow the same pattern if you're interested, and we'll see who we can get along as an expert to tell us how it all works at the moment and if there's anything we can do as a county to make things go better. Okay? Anything else on these task finish, health, work, being programme forward plan? Councillor Hill.
Just wondering, a couple of things that we've mentioned a lot before is obviously the issue of the dental service, Berwick particularly, but elsewhere, and also the ambulance response times.
The dental thing, I think, is coming down the line, isn't it?
Yeah, so the ICB announced it the end of July that they were working on a new dental strategy, which is due for publication in October. So once they've published that, I think we'll have them back to update on that.
From the pre-meeting, it was let's get a task and finish group up and going. And after that report, we can probably, right, after we've looked at A, B, this becomes C.
I know sometimes we've got a report, we might leave it a couple of months, but can we have it quite urgently when it's complete? Ask them to come.
Well, I think let's get the report, and then we'll work on it from there. It's like pulling teeth, Georgie. Right, urgent business, I have none. Date of next meeting, Tuesday the 7th of November. Oh, the decorations will be up then, won't they? No, November, yeah. We'll probably have a task and finish meeting before that, and talks about the Cramlington one, but I think we'll get going on the defibrillator one to get into that. Thank you for your attendance. Not bad.